James was a spirited teenager with a heart as big as his dreams, living in a quaint, close-knit neighborhood. His family, though warm and loving, was often burdened by financial struggles that kept them from enjoying simple luxuries. Despite this, James never let his circumstances dampen his spirit. He was known throughout the neighborhood for his willingness to lend a hand, whether it was helping carry groceries or mowing a lawn. Among those who knew him was Mrs. Thompson, his elderly neighbor who lived alone in the house next door. Mrs. Thompson was a woman of quiet dignity, her life marked by years of wisdom and stories. She had been a widow for nearly a decade, yet she found solace in tending to her garden, a vibrant array of flowers and plants that seemed to dance in the sunlight. James often saw her from his window, painstakingly pruning roses or planting new seeds with a patience that only age could bring. It was during one of these observations that he noticed her struggling, her movements slower and more labored than usual. Concerned, James decided to offer his help. He approached her one sunny afternoon, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his worn jeans, a smile playing on his lips. "Mrs. Thompson," he called out, "do you need any help with the garden? I can give you a hand if you'd like." Mrs. Thompson paused, looking up from her work. Her eyes were wise and kind, with a hint of surprise at his offer. "Oh, James, that's very kind of you," she replied, her voice warm yet tinged with hesitation. "I wouldn't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble at all," James assured her, his sincerity evident. "I like being outside, and I'd love to learn more about gardening." With a gentle nod, Mrs. Thompson accepted his offer, and thus began their regular gardening sessions. Each afternoon, James would join her, his youthful energy complementing her knowledge and experience. As they worked side by side, Mrs. Thompson would share stories of her past, tales of her late husband who had shared her passion for gardening, and the adventures they had embarked on together. James listened intently, fascinated by the life she had led and the wisdom she imparted. In return, he shared his own dreams and aspirations, finding in her a confidante who listened without judgment. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, grounded in mutual respect and affection. The garden became their sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down, allowing them to savor the simple joys of life. For James, these moments were a welcome respite from the worries that often plagued his family. He found solace in the rhythm of their work, the scent of fresh earth, and the vibrant colors of the flowers they tended together. Through these shared experiences, James discovered a new appreciation for the world around him, learning to see beauty in the ordinary and finding strength in the connections he forged. Little did he know, the seeds of kindness he had sown would soon blossom into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. As the weeks turned into months, James and Mrs. Thompson's friendship blossomed like the flowers they tended. Their daily routine became a cherished ritual, and the garden transformed into a tapestry of colors and scents, each plant a testament to their shared labor and companionship. James found himself looking forward to these afternoons, not just for the gardening but for the stories and laughter that filled the air. Mrs. Thompson, in turn, became more than just a neighbor to James. She was a mentor, a grandmother figure who imparted wisdom with a gentle hand and a kind heart. She taught him about the intricacies of life, the importance of patience, and the value of nurturing not only plants but the relationships that color one's life. One day, while they were planting a new bed of marigolds, Mrs. Thompson paused, wiping her brow with a gloved hand. "James, have I ever told you about the time I traveled to Italy with my husband?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with the memory. James shook his head, eager to hear another of her tales. "No, you haven't. Was it beautiful?" "Oh, it was magnificent," she replied, her voice rich with nostalgia. "We spent our days exploring vineyards and our evenings enjoying the most delicious meals. It was a time of pure joy, and it taught me to appreciate the beauty in every moment." James listened, captivated by the vivid imagery she painted with her words. He could almost see the rolling hills of Tuscany and taste the rich flavors of Italian cuisine. Her stories transported him to places he had never been, igniting a spark of wanderlust within him. As they worked, Mrs. Thompson continued sharing her life's adventures, each story a lesson wrapped in nostalgia. She spoke of love and loss, of triumphs and challenges, and of the resilience that life required. James absorbed these lessons, finding in them strength and guidance that resonated deeply with him. The community began to notice the bond between James and Mrs. Thompson, their camaraderie a heartwarming sight. Neighbors would often stop by, drawn by the vibrant garden and the laughter that echoed from within it. James felt a sense of pride and belonging, knowing that their efforts had brought joy, not only to themselves but to those around them. Despite his family's financial struggles, James found solace in these interactions. The garden became a place where he could escape the worries that weighed on his shoulders, a sanctuary where he could lose himself in the simple act of tending to the earth. The connection he shared with Mrs. Thompson offered him a sense of purpose and fulfillment, a reminder that life's true riches lay not in material wealth but in the relationships we cultivate. As the seasons changed, James noticed a shift in Mrs. Thompson's health. She moved more slowly, her breath sometimes catching as she worked. Concerned, James gently suggested they take more breaks, ensuring she rested when needed. Despite her declining health, Mrs. Thompson remained cheerful, her spirit undiminished. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch sipping lemonade, Mrs. Thompson turned to James, her expression thoughtful. "You know, James," she began, her voice soft yet firm, "you've made these past months some of the happiest I've had in a long time. Your kindness and company have meant the world to me." James felt a warmth spread through him, touched by her words. "I should be thanking you, Mrs. Thompson," he replied earnestly. "You've taught me so much, and I'm grateful for every moment we've spent together." Mrs. Thompson smiled, reaching over to pat his hand. "You have a good heart, James. Don't ever lose that." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, James reflected on her words. He realized the profound impact their friendship had on his life, how it had shaped him into the person he was becoming. The lessons he learned from Mrs. Thompson were far more valuable than any material possession, gifts that would guide him through life's challenges. Unbeknownst to James, the seeds of kindness he had sown were about to bear fruit in ways he could never have anticipated. The bond he shared with Mrs. Thompson, nurtured through empathy and compassion, held the promise of a future filled with hope and possibility. As autumn leaves began to blanket the neighborhood in rich hues of gold and crimson, James found himself more entwined in Mrs. Thompson's life. Her health continued to decline, yet her spirit remained unyielding, a testament to the resilience she had always spoken of. James, ever attentive, adjusted their routine to accommodate her needs, ensuring their time together was filled with comfort and joy. One crisp afternoon, as they sat on the porch wrapped in cozy blankets, Mrs. Thompson shared a particularly poignant story about her late husband. She spoke of their shared dreams, the adventures they had planned but never realized, and the deep love that had sustained them through life's trials. Her voice, though tinged with sadness, was filled with gratitude for the life they had shared. James listened intently, his heart swelling with admiration for the woman beside him. Her stories were a tapestry of love and resilience, a reminder of the enduring power of human connection. He found himself reflecting on his own life, the dreams he held close, and the relationships that shaped him. As the days grew shorter and the air turned brisk, Mrs. Thompson's health took a turn for the worse. James found himself spending more time at her side, helping with household tasks and ensuring she was comfortable. Despite her frailty, Mrs. Thompson remained cheerful, her eyes twinkling with warmth each time she saw James. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Mrs. Thompson turned to James with a serious expression. "James," she began, her voice steady but soft, "there's something I want to tell you." James nodded, sensing the gravity of her words. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. What is it?" She took a deep breath, her gaze distant, as if recalling a distant memory. "You've brought so much joy into my life, James. More than I can express. I want you to know that you've made a difference, not just to me, but to everyone who knows you." James felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by her kindness. "I'm just glad I could help, Mrs. Thompson. You've taught me so much." Mrs. Thompson smiled, a tender, knowing smile. "And there's one more thing I want to give you, something I've been planning for a while." James looked at her, puzzled but intrigued. "What do you mean?" "You'll see soon enough," she replied, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "But promise me you'll keep being the wonderful person you are." James nodded, his heart full. "I promise, Mrs. Thompson." As winter approached, Mrs. Thompson's condition worsened. James continued to visit her daily, offering comfort and companionship during her final days. He cherished these moments, knowing they were precious and fleeting. When Mrs. Thompson passed away peacefully in her sleep, James was heartbroken. The loss of his dear friend left a void in his heart, but he found solace in the memories they had created together. Her stories, her laughter, and her wisdom were imprinted on his soul, guiding him through the grief. In the days following her passing, James was invited to the reading of Mrs. Thompson's will. He attended with a heavy heart, expecting nothing more than to honor her memory. As the lawyer read through the document, James listened intently, his mind drifting to the garden they had nurtured together. To his surprise, the lawyer paused and addressed him directly. "James, Mrs. Thompson has left you a significant part of her estate." James blinked, taken aback. "Me? But why?" The lawyer smiled, a hint of warmth in his professional demeanor. "She expressed in her will that you were like a grandson to her, and she wanted to ensure you could pursue your dreams." James sat in stunned silence as the lawyer continued, detailing the financial gift Mrs. Thompson had left him, a sum far exceeding anything he could have imagined. It was enough to secure his family's future and provide him with opportunities he had only dreamed of. Along with the financial gift, Mrs. Thompson had left him her beloved garden, a place that had become a sanctuary for them both. The garden, with its vibrant blooms and rich earth, was now his to cherish and nurture. Overwhelmed with emotion, James felt a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Mrs. Thompson's final act of kindness was a testament to the bond they had shared, a reminder of the impact one life can have on another. As he left the lawyer's office, James reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The simple act of offering help had blossomed into a friendship that transcended age and circumstance, changing his life in ways he could never have foreseen. With Mrs. Thompson's gift, James was able to support his family and pursue his dreams, all while honoring the memory of the woman who had taught him the true value of kindness and connection. Her legacy lived on in the garden they had tended together, a symbol of the enduring power of love and friendship. The days following the reading of Mrs. Thompson's will were a whirlwind of emotions for James. The unexpected inheritance had brought a sense of security and possibility that he had never known, yet it was bittersweet, intertwined with the loss of his dear friend. As he walked through the garden she had left him, he felt her presence in every flower, every leaf, and every whisper of the wind. His family, upon learning of the inheritance, was overwhelmed with gratitude. The financial gift allowed them to pay off debts and breathe easier, lifting a weight that had long burdened their lives. For James, it meant the opportunity to pursue his education, a dream that had seemed distant and unattainable before Mrs. Thompson's generosity. Determined to honor her memory, James threw himself into caring for the garden, tending to it with the same love and dedication they had shared. Each day, he spent hours among the plants, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of gardening. It was as if Mrs. Thompson was still there beside him, guiding his hands and whispering encouragement. The garden became a place of reflection for James, a sanctuary where he could process his grief and embrace the future. He often thought about the lessons Mrs. Thompson had imparted, the stories she had shared, and the wisdom she had passed down. Her words echoed in his mind, reminding him of the importance of kindness, resilience, and the connections that bind us all. As spring arrived, the garden burst into life, a riot of colors and scents that seemed to celebrate the new beginnings in James's life. Neighbors and friends often stopped by, drawn by the beauty of the garden and the warmth of the young man who had become a fixture within it. James welcomed them with open arms, sharing stories of Mrs. Thompson and the bond they had forged. Inspired by her legacy, James decided to use part of the inheritance to create a community garden, a space where neighbors could come together to plant, grow, and connect. He envisioned it as a tribute to Mrs. Thompson, a way to extend the kindness she had shown him to others. With the help of friends and community members, James transformed a vacant lot into a thriving garden filled with vegetables, flowers, and herbs. It quickly became a hub of activity, a place where people of all ages gathered to share knowledge, laughter, and the fruits of their labor. The community garden became a testament to the power of kindness and connection, a living embodiment of Mrs. Thompson's spirit. It brought people together, fostering friendships and a sense of belonging that transcended individual circumstances. James watched with pride as the garden flourished, knowing that it was a reflection of the love and generosity that had shaped his own life. As he prepared to leave for college, James felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia. The opportunities before him were vast, yet he knew he would carry Mrs. Thompson's lessons with him wherever he went. Her gift had not only changed his future but had also instilled in him a deep appreciation for the simple, yet profound, impact of kindness. On his last day at the garden before heading off to college, James stood amidst the blooms, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the friendship that had transformed his life, for the woman who had believed in him and shown him the true meaning of generosity. As he closed the garden gate behind him, James knew that Mrs. Thompson's legacy would continue to flourish, not only in the garden but in the lives of all those who had been touched by her kindness. Her final act of love had set in motion a ripple effect, one that would continue to spread, nurturing hope and connection in a world that so often needed it. With a heart full of hope and determination, James stepped into the future, ready to embrace the opportunities before him. He carried with him the lessons of the past, the wisdom of a cherished friend, and the knowledge that a single act of kindness could indeed change the world. As James embarked on his college journey, he carried the spirit of Mrs. Thompson and the garden with him, both as a source of inspiration and a guiding light. The transition to college life was filled with challenges, but he approached each with the resilience and optimism that Mrs. Thompson had instilled in him. Her stories and lessons were woven into the fabric of his daily life, providing comfort and direction in unfamiliar surroundings. At college, James found himself surrounded by a diverse group of students, each with their own unique backgrounds and aspirations. He quickly realized that the values he had learned from Mrs. Thompson, kindness, empathy, and the importance of community were universal truths that connected people across all walks of life. These values guided him as he navigated the complexities of academia and social life, helping him form meaningful connections with those around him. James's passion for gardening and community building led him to join a student organization focused on sustainable agriculture and environmental advocacy. Through this group, he met like-minded individuals who shared his vision of creating spaces that fostered both growth and connection. Together, they worked on projects that promoted sustainability and environmental awareness, drawing on the lessons James had learned from his time with Mrs. Thompson. Inspired by the community garden back home, James proposed the idea of creating a similar initiative on campus. He envisioned a garden that would serve as a gathering place for students, faculty, and staff, a space where people could come together to plant, learn, and share in the joys of gardening. His enthusiasm and dedication quickly won the support of his peers and professors, and soon the project was underway. Under James's leadership, the campus garden blossomed into a vibrant oasis, a testament to the power of collaboration and shared purpose. Students from all disciplines came together to contribute their skills and knowledge, transforming the garden into a thriving ecosystem of plants and ideas. Workshops and events were held regularly, drawing participants from across the campus community and beyond. As the garden flourished, so too did James's understanding of the impact one person could have on the world. He saw firsthand how a simple idea, nurtured with care and dedication, could grow into something far greater than himself. The garden became a symbol of hope and possibility, a reminder that change often begins with small, compassionate acts. James's work with the campus garden caught the attention of local organizations and community leaders, leading to opportunities for collaboration and expansion. He was invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing his experiences and the lessons he had learned from Mrs. Thompson. His story resonated with audiences, inspiring others to consider the ways they could make a difference in their own communities. Through these experiences, James realized that Mrs. Thompson's legacy extended far beyond the garden they had tended together. Her influence had sparked a movement, one that encouraged people to connect with each other and the environment in meaningful ways. Her simple act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, touching countless lives and creating a ripple effect that continued to spread. As James approached graduation, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The opportunities before him were vast, yet he remained grounded by the values that Mrs. Thompson had instilled in him. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the friendship that had transformed his life and for the woman who had believed in him when he needed it most. With a degree in environmental science and a wealth of experience under his belt, James was ready to take the next step in his journey. He knew that wherever life led him, he would carry Mrs. Thompson's lessons with him, using them to guide his actions and decisions. Her legacy was a constant reminder of the power of kindness, the importance of community, and the enduring impact of a single life. As he prepared to leave college and embark on a new chapter, James felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The world was full of possibilities, and he was eager to explore them, armed with the knowledge that he could make a difference. With Mrs. Thompson's spirit as his guide, he stepped into the future, ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead.